hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Several months later.
Next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU, Superman Legacy. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025.
Ah, the movie post-credit scene. A once tasty surprise dessert promising a fruitful night ahead of revelry and mystery. Now a sus piece of straight meat we drunkenly wolfed down because the dinner party only had heavy apps. Post-credit scenes have now become a staple for major franchises like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One final morsel waiting for us at the end of hundreds of undervalued VFX artists designed to tease future installments and assure a narrative plan to invest our hopes upon. But now some might say these post-credit scene tales are wagging the dogs, and filmgoers are really just paying to see movies to find out where things are going next. So in today's Invosstigation, let's examine, are post-credit scenes more important than movies? We gotta go back to the start to see how these gimmicks evolved from their humble beginnings to the power moves they are now. The first recognized movie post-credit scene came in 1966's The Silencers, in which Matt Helm, a photographer and spy played by Dean Martin, shows up after the credits on a revolving bed with scantily clad women as text reads, "Coming up next, Matt Helm meets lovely Cravesette in Murderers Row." Murderers Row was a sequel coming later in 1966, the second of 4 of these movies that they made based on Donald Hamilton's novels, so this series was definitely planned out. In this earlier era, post-credit scenes were usually places for jokey callbacks or meta gags. 1979's The Muppet Movie ends with a post-credit scene of Animal telling everyone to go home. Go home! Bye-bye. This would actually be a running joke called back in 1984's The Muppets Take Manhattan. Bye-bye, bye-bye, hasta luego. And this concept would inspire the post-credit scene of 1986's Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
It's over. Go home.
An idea that would be parodied in the post-credit scene for 2016's Deadpool.
It's over. Go home.
But since 2016 was a modern era, he also teased that Cable would be coming in the sequel there. But really, teasing audiences' expectations would be a joke cashed in on in post-credit scenes of 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming and 2022's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
And you wonder why you waited so long for something so disappointing.
It's over!
The earlier years were just a simpler time when credit sequences were places to show blooper reels, outtakes, jokey epilogues of the characters. Such was the case for the credit sequences of Jackie Chan films like Police Story and Rush Hour, and Jim Carrey films like Liar Liar. It was considered bonus footage designed to send people out of the theater on a laugh. Pixar would actually later parody this with credit outtakes for A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, and Monsters Inc. as if the animated characters were actors on sets. But I find it interesting that that original post-credit scene of 1966's The Silencers was also one of the few early years examples of a film's tag as a marketing ploy to get audiences to come back for a planned sequel. There's no shame in that, especially when there was an actual plan for a sequel with an approaching release date. Now, why didn't we see post-credit scenes before 1966? Well, that's really because film credits used to be shown before the main runtime of the film, as was the case in 1939's The Wizard of Oz, and most other movies from those decades. This began to change in 1956 with Around the World in 80 Days, which shifted its credits to the end to make room for a prologue about Jules Verne and rocketry. This led to further examples of films moving the credits to the end, like 1966's Alfie, 1968's Head, and 1972's The Godfather. And of course, that was the real game changer because Francis Ford Coppola was part of the new Hollywood generation of filmmakers that changed everything. This included Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and George Lucas. And famously, in 1977's Star Wars, George Lucas placed his name in the opening credits and the rest of the crew at the end of the movie. When Lucas wanted to do the same for Empire Strikes Back, with his Lucasfilm logo opening the film, the Directors Guild of America fined him $250,000 and lobbied to remove the film from theaters. Lucas paid the fine and left the DGA. So now we're in a place where credits generally have shifted to the end of the film, which has led to these gimmicks like bloopers and post-credit scenes becoming really popular with filmmakers. Now, sometimes this includes just creepy little winks to leave viewers with one final scare, like in 1986 in James Cameron's Aliens, a movie with credits that ended with the sound of an alien facehugger crawling around. Now, sometimes the sound could just be a thematic grace note, as was the case with the final sound during the credits of Avengers Endgame, which is just the sound of Tony Stark hammering. But I think it's better when it's a little creepy, like in 1999 with George Lucas, again, in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which had credits that, in the final seconds, included just the sounds of Darth Vader breathing. And this, plus the Naboo victory theme in the final scene being a major key rendition of the Emperor's theme from Return of the Jedi, were both nods at a dark future that awaited Anakin Skywalker in the next 2 films. So all of this inspired a more aggressive and intentional era of experimentation with post-credit scenes as extensions of film stories between installments. Now, before even the MCU refined this for superhero cinema, we saw this in franchises like Disney's The Pirates of the Caribbean. 2003's The Curse of the Black Pearls post-credit scene shows Barbossa's monkey snatching a piece of gold, showing that curse is back on. And again, a creepy little jump scare when he jumps at the camera. Dead Man's Chest had a more jokey one where that dog being worshipped by the natives. And then at World's End had a post-credit scene of Will and Elizabeth's son 10 years later reuniting with Will. Similarly, the Fast and the Furious films and the Transformers films would almost always end with post-credit scenes just like this, even if it was just Dom Toretto driving around in Baja. But really, the art of this was perfected by Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios. His approach actually began before Marvel Studios, with Marvel titles at other studios, like 2003's Daredevil at Fox with Ben Affleck. That movie ended with a post-credit scene of Bullseye and a full-body cast killing a fly with a syringe.
Bullseye.
In 2006's X-Men The Last Stand ended with a post-credit scene of Charles Xavier's consciousness in a new body.
Hello, Moira.
Charles.
Now, neither of these post-credit scenes led to anything. In fact, Patrick Stewart Charles Xavier would just return randomly alive again in his own body in the post-credit scene of 2013's The Wolverine. But as Kevin Feige launched the MCU with 2008's Iron Man, he used some very well planned out post-credit scenes to link all of the Phase 1 films. Tony Stark meets Nick Fury, Tony asks Thunderbolt Ross about the Hulk, Loki moves in on the Tesseract in the Thor post-credit scene, and then Thanos arrives in the Avengers post-credit scene. This would continue throughout Phase 2, with one movie's post-credit scene linking the events of a future installment that had nothing to do with it, like the post-credit scene of Captain America Winter Soldier, setting up the Maximoff twins, whom we would meet in Age of Ultron. You know, now that I'm working on 2 channels here on the new Rockstars Network, my time in the day is very limited, and now, especially that spring is here, I want to spend my few precious free hours outside. I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen, and the best way I have found to help me save time is with Factor. Their fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then go back in the park and soak up the sun, or if you're me, retreat back into your hole and analyze movies some more. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. And yes, in other videos you'll hear me talking about using HelloFresh as well, but that's because Factor is now owned by HelloFresh. I use both and it makes my life so much easier. It's a real lifesaver. Factor not only lets me skip the trip to the grocery store, but I also get to skip the chopping, the prepping, the cleaning up. Factor has more than 34 weekly options, so I never get tired of what I'm eating. Factor also now offers Gourmet Plus meals as part of your weekly options, which means you can get a little gourmet with your meal plan whenever you're craving something special. For sides, you get premium produce like broccoli and broccolini to perfectly complement your protein, which can be surf and surf, that's shrimp and salmon, or surf and turf, shrimp and steak. And I can tell you from personal experience, even after reheating the steak, it's so good. It's not dry, it's not tough, it's just good. This month, I got into some pasta, which I really like to do for lunch because it's not that heavy. The sauce that it came with was so amazing.
Oh, that's so good. It's got a nice sweet kind of tanginess to it. I love it.
So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code NRDeepDive50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. You gotta use that particular code because that goes directly to helping this channel, The Deep Dive. So once again, that's factor75.com or use the code NRDeepDive50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Seeing the success of this, other franchises and other studios followed suit. X-Men Days of Future Past had a post-credit scene setting up Apocalypse in ancient Egypt. Warner Brothers used post-credit scenes to interlink their Godzilla and Kong films. Some of my favorite post-credit scenes and one of my favorite film franchises. One of the craziest examples was Universal's M. Night Shyamalan 2017 thriller film Split insanely ended with a smash cut to the title followed by a scene that connected it to Shyamalan's Bruce Willis film in 2000 Unbreakable, setting up the 2019 film Glass. But the commercial success of the maneuver caused studios to get a little greedy, get ahead of themselves, starting to Hail Mary some sequels that they didn't really have plans for yet. Now we tend to make fun of other studios and other franchises for this, but Marvel's hands aren't so clean, because in Phase 3 of the MCU, a number of the post-credit scenes set up plot lines that still have yet to be resolved, several years later. Like in 2016's Doctor Strange, that post-credit scene showed Mordo attacking Benjamin Bratt's amateur sorcerer character.
Too many sorcerers.
This Mordo never showed up in the sequel. We only met his multiversal variant, but I guess there was a deleted opening scene that would have showed Sorcerer hunting Mordo getting decapitated by Wanda. 2017 Spider-Man Homecoming post-credit scene showed Adrian Toomes running into Scorpion Scorpion, Matt Gargan, Michael Mando in prison.
You know, take a picture, slice his throat, put his head in a dryer.
And Michael Mando, Matt Gargan, has yet to reappear. Perhaps recognizing how insane post-credit scenes had gotten, James Gunn in 2017 for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 included 5 post-credit scenes, the most we've ever seen for an MCU film. One of which, with Adam Warlock's Cocoon, will be resolved with Volume 3. 3 of the others were just gags, but one showed Sylvester Stallone leading the group of Ravager pirates that included Michelle Yeoh as Alita Ogord, that will probably never come back since Yeoh played another role in Shang-Chi. In the post-credit scenes of the more recent MCU titles, like the piece that Eddie Brock Venom symbiote left in the MCU after No Way Home, Charlize Theron introduced as Clea, Brett Goldstein introduced as Hercules, we're just kind of left to wonder when, if ever, the MCU could ever pick back up on these. But yeah, it's even weirder outside of the MCU, the 2017 Justice League theatrical cut ended with a post-credit scene showing Lex Luthor escaping prison and teaming up with Joe Manganiello's Deadshot. Deadshot was going to be the villain of the Ben Affleck Batman solo film that Affleck later parted from, and that movie became the Robert Pattinson Matt Reeves Batman with no Deadshot in it. 2019 Shazam had a post-credit scene with Mr. Mind and Sylvana that still wasn't resolved in a post-credit scene of the 2023 sequel. And again, Black Adam had this post-credit scene hastily shot a month before the film's release. Dwayne Johnson's attempt to change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe, as he had promised again and again, by bringing back Henry Cavill as Superman to set up a future matchup. But then a few weeks later, James Gunn announced that they would be recasting Superman. So now when we see these bold post-credit scenes of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which show Jonathan Majors as countless over-the-top Kang variants to set up a 2025 Avengers Kang Dynasty film, we just have questions. Was this really the best way to introduce Kang? Was Quantumania worth it as a story to get to this? Was Quantumania even a movie? Was it really a verisimilitude of a film, a 2-hour experience, part of a narrative investment that will pay off 2 years from now? The 2019 Captain Marvel film made over $1 billion. Think about that. How much have you thought about that film since then? Was that really a film? Or was it a 2-hour cutscene between Infinity War and Endgame with a post-credit scene dovetailing into the latter, which Brie Larson infamously shot before shooting anything else for Marvel Studios on a random green screen set without being told what it was for or who she was even in the scene with? The truth is that the most exciting future teasing MCU post-credit scenes that I mentioned, Tony Stark meeting Nick Fury, Thanos arriving, the Maximoffs, notice how they all followed films that were much more memorable than post-credit scenes were. Iron Man, Avengers, Winter Soldier, the post-credit scenes mattered because the movies that preceded them mattered. We will not care about what's next if we are bored with the path as it is. And when we sit in movie theaters during the credits, we shouldn't be twiddling our thumbs waiting for post-credit scenes so that we can leave. Ideally, we should be in awe of the movie we just watched and all the artists who worked on it, playing the film over and over again in our heads, and then, oh wait, bam, surprise, a nice little bonus scene with a twist. And so when we look back at the history of all of the ways post-credit scenes have been used since 1966, I think we can assemble a checklist of qualities that make a satisfying post-credit scene experience that doesn't overshadow the film it's attached to. 1. If it is setting up a sequel or a spin-off, that project should be confirmed or at least explicit from the context. Otherwise, what are you even selling? 2. It should try to call back some recurring bit or curiosity from the film that preceded it. It should feel like an epilogue rather than just a random scene from another movie. 3. It should both kind of amuse us and terrify us, to keep us anxious about the future but enjoying the ride, that feeling we feel as we scale up the peak of a roller coaster. And 4. The film it comes after needs to stand on its own and not just be a cog in the studio's franchise machine. So if we apply this checklist, the most effective MCU post-credit scenes, I think, have been Nick Fury meeting Tony Stark, the Thanos reveal after Avengers 2012, and Nick Fury dusting after Avengers Infinity War. All 3 followed amazing films. All 3 were equally funny and equally creepy. They directly set up confirmed follow-up films, and they're directly consequential from the events of the film. They hit us with unexpected consequences that we didn't think of until that second, but we realize the moment we see it, oh, of course, this is exactly what should be happening right now. Now again, there is no shame in studios using moonshot sales pitches to get us to come back with post-credit scenes. We know what we signed up for, we love being pitched like this. But just deliver the goods to honor the artists who worked on the film so as many people see their names crawl up the screen as we wait for these last little goodies. Thank you for watching this month's investigation, and what question do you want me to investigate next? You can support our growing network by grabbing something from nerdriot.shop like our Vossmanot shirt design, subscribe to the deep dive, turn notifications on, and share this channel and its videos with everyone you know. Follow me at EA Voss. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, my divers of the deep.